Right. Welcome, everyone. Great to see some familiar faces here already. So as Isabelle mentioned, I run Haymarket HQ, but also went deep down the rabbit hole last year when I started creating my own NFT collection because, hey, lockdown, what else do you want to do? So I'll be discussing a little bit about, well, my journey, I guess, into the whole NFT space. But mostly my goal will be to give you a bit of an idea of, well, what is an NFT? What's the hype about? What makes an NFT valuable or not so valuable, right? So hopefully we can keep this, I'll keep it pretty informal. If you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'll do my best to answer them. If I can, I won't have all the answers. And I'll just try and keep this to 20, 30 minutes or so we have plenty of time for questions. I'll give you some ideas as to what are the trends behind NFT, current craze about it. What are some examples of brands that are using them in really creative ways? Essentially everything that you see in here. But I do want to note that I'll mostly talk about images. So NFT images, probably the thing that you think about when you hear about NFTs. I like to think NFTs are much bigger than that, but just to keep it somewhat within 20 to 30 minutes, I'll just focus on what currently is the craze, and that's all about these art NFTs or these images. So I'll jump straight into it. Again, throw your questions in the chat here or in Discord, and Isabelle will be sort of managing that. All right, so first up, what's up with all this craze? Why do we suddenly have an NFT boom, right? I think it's a combination of three factors. One is the maturation of blockchain technology. In the end, NFTs are on the blockchain mostly. China has centralized chains. In the rest of the world, we essentially all have these decentralized blockchains. So they came in 2015, 16, 17, blockchain became big, lots of promises were made, few promises were kept. But this last year, you start to actually see some of these blockchain technologies really come to life and really solving problems. The second thing that really came to life was this mainstream adoption of digital assets. And I think COVID probably played a role in that. Where we live more digital lives, we can't necessarily go out every day or most of the day. So we started living more online, and with that became more of a mainstream adoption of digital assets. And obviously that also really increased the prices and all the speculation of blockchain coins and networks, you name it. And that again then increased popularity. And the third is significant VC investment. So until about 6 months ago or so, less than 1% of all VC or venture capital investments, so that's essentially companies investing other people's money into startups, less than 1% of all that money went into blockchain. So that's a very, very small proportion of money, but that has changed. The largest companies, VCs, angel investors have all jumped into it. So with a lot of money comes a lot of noise. So I think these three key trends have really led to that boom that we're currently witnessing. And we're right now in a little bit more of a bear market, a little bit quieter market, but I think it's only still the start of where we are. But hopefully that it gives you a bit of an idea as to why can't you stop reading about NFTs today. So I'll dive straight into it. What is an NFT? I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what they really are. It stands for non-fungible token, and that's the fungibility or non-fungibility that sort of sets it apart. So the first thing is fungible. $1 is you can exchange for $1. Oil you can exchange for oil. They're the exact same thing. However, if you look at non-fungible assets, that means you can't just trade them one for one. So for instance, a home, you can't just trade one for one. Neither can you do that with an NFT because each NFT is unique and is therefore has its own unique value. So that's the first thing to understand, is that it's non-fungible. Then an NFT can be really anything. It can be a unique digital object, like an artifact in a game. So you can see that in a lot of these games these days. Say you win a special sword, that can be an NFT. It can be art. For instance, a Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT, which you may have seen, these crazy apes that you see everywhere. But also it can be a financial contract, a unique financial contract. So when we talk about NFTs, it's really not just images. It stands for essentially a unique smart contract. Now, NFTs, what makes them or what sets them apart? Well, usually they have three characteristics. One is they are unique, so they're one of a kind. So each image that you see online is very much unique, either visually or through its inherent traits and its metadata. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that they're tamper proof, and that's because they're on the blockchain. So once you put something on the blockchain, a node, a block onto the blockchain, you cannot alter that afterwards. You cannot rewrite history in that sense. And it's always visible there. You can always see when it was created, by who it was created, because in the end, the blockchain is essentially a public ledger. And the third thing is that it's generally, with the exception of, say, China, it's generally on a decentralized network, so on a decentralized blockchain network. So those are the three key things that make an NFT. Now, again, for this presentation, I'll focus mostly on images, because images is the current hype, and that's probably the easiest way to understand it. That's the easiest way for me to understand it as well, or how I got into it. But I do want to talk a little bit about, well, what actually is that NFT? Because you read a lot about it in the news, where people say it's a craze, this is a scam, to people saying, look, this is the future of life. So I just wanted to sort of give you an under the hood look at, well, what actually is an NFT? And really what an NFT is a unique smart contract. And that's essentially a piece of code. So it's not too different from a normal contract, except that it's digital and it has mechanisms in there that will execute automatically if certain parameters are met. If you work a little bit in the web space, you may have heard of a company called If This, Then That. This is very similar. If X condition is met, then Y happens. So that's essentially what's in these smart contracts. Now, the good thing is that you don't have to have a middleman in the middle to say, oh, yes, that was right, or let me check that contract. No, it's all done automatically. So there's no middleman necessary. So when you buy an NFT, say an image, what you really buy is a node in that smart contract. And that smart contract can point to any asset. And again, I briefly went over that earlier, but it could be any asset. So an NFT does not necessarily mean an image. It could be a house. It could be anything you can imagine. We've seen it happen with whiskey barrels. So where whiskey barrels were sold as NFTs. But also we've seen it as a sort of entry ticket into clubs, and I'll give you some examples later. Gaming assets are a big thing at the moment. But again, today I'll mostly focus on the art NFTs, the PFPs, the profile pictures. So here are some examples of NFTs. So for instance, on the right top there, you see a beautiful image that is actually one of the most famous paintings in a museum in Italy. So when COVID hit, museums weren't terribly popular. So especially not Italy, that was hit early and was hit very hard. So what that museum did was they said, look, we still need to get some money in because we no longer have any foot traffic. We don't have any ticket sales. How can we still make some money? So what they did is they digitized one of their artworks and said, look, we have digitized it, then we've put it up on the blockchain, we turn it into an NFT, and let's auction it and see how much we can get for it. I think this particular NFT they made $180,000 out of, which made up for more than enough of lost sales during that time. So it was quite a unique way of making a little bit of money in the midst of COVID. Another unique use case of an NFT was someone that said, look, I'm going to set up a coffee or a cafe, and I need to fund it. I don't have the money for it. What if I give out a unique collection of NFTs, say 10,000 of them, and each NFT costs a bit of money, of course, but when you are the owner, you don't just have an image. With that also come unique rights. So for instance, when you come to the coffee shop, you get a discount on XYZ, or you get first dibs on a new product launch, you name it, they all put it in the smart contract or in the terms and conditions. So this was a very smart way of getting people involved in that local cafe from day one, because they knew that, say this cafe becomes popular, the NFT that I have that represents sort of a portion of that cafe, or at least is connected to it, may increase in value. Plus, I like to just support something that's local. So it was a really good marketing strategy, but also a good way to raise some money without giving out any equity. So when you buy that NFT, you didn't actually own a portion of the business. Another example is a music NFT marketplace, which where you can buy NFT music, or essentially MP3s, and you own them. But probably the most famous one is not my project on the left, the Kimmies, where you can see a Kim Jong-un inspired NFT, but it's the Bored Ape Yacht Club that you see on your right hand. So that little picture that you see there went for, I believe, $3.5 million US. And that project started last year, I believe, April, if I'm correct, and sold out, I believe, in a few hours. So they had 10,000 of these unique apes that got sold out. And I said, look, when you have an ape like that, you get access to our Discord community, to our chat room, where we can chat about the future of this. We can create a course, and you can be part of that community. You can basically create the story with us. So it was a fun experiment to see if they could build a community. And I'd argue they've succeeded because they have had resales. So looking at number of times they were sold, the value of that, of over $1 billion US dollars in less than a year. So these 10,000 apes have generated well over $1 billion US dollars by now. And that's great news for anyone holding these apes, because they say, wow, this speculative value just keeps going up and up and up. And every time that gets resold, the original creators get 10% commission. So for artists, if there's artists in the room, normally when you sell an artwork, you may be by law required to receive, or sorry, you sell an artwork to someone, that person sells it on to someone else. I believe Australian law says that you should receive a commission for that. Now, that barely ever happens, though, and especially if you're less well known. Now, in the case of smart contracts, it's baked in. It says, look, this smart contract, if you buy it from me, if you buy this NFT from me, then automatically 10% gets sold and gets sent to the original creator. There's no bartering here. There's no discussion that just happens automatically. So this is great for artists because they just get the 10% royalty, as they call it, every time on every resale forever. So the guys that created Bored Ape Yacht Club made a lot of money, but are likely to make so much more in the future as they go along. The same is something we've did with, for instance, the Kimmies, where we said, well, how can we incentivize people to purchase one, but also then to trade it? Where we said, well, half of that 10% royalties goes to anyone that currently holds an NFT, a Kimmie. So that incentivizes people to talk about it. So these are smart financial mechanisms or community mechanisms or whatever you want to call it, to essentially get people to really stand behind your project. And I'll discuss that a little bit later when I go through some of these mechanisms. Here's some look at some brands and how they use NFTs. So one that I thought was very smart was the one on the left, the Fly Fish Club. So Gary V, some of you may have heard about him here. He's a bit of a, he started a wine company, then became a bit of a motivational speaker for entrepreneurs, and then really started getting into NFTs, where he quickly built up a large following. And I believe he made over $100 million US dollars trading NFTs in the past year alone. So what he at some point decided was, he said, look, I have a very, very active community that looks up to me. They'll buy anything I sell. So he decided to set up an omakase, a sort of small dining, Japanese style dining restaurant in New York. He said, okay, so for anyone that wants to ever go and eat there, you have to buy one of the Fly Fish Club NFTs. Now they went for thousands of dollars. So you have to buy an NFT in order to make a booking and then still pay for your food. So this NFT sale allowed him to raise a few $1 million to set up the restaurant. And then he knew he had a loyal following of people that would probably go in there and buy it. But also every time someone said, look, I'm moving out of New York, or I'm done with sushi, I'm going to sell it, every time on whatever the resale value is, he gets a 10% clip. So he built a business on top of a business. So these are very interesting financial mechanisms that he put in there. Stoner Cats was another one. So it was developed by Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis. And that was essentially a series that they said, look, we're going to create a series. If you buy one of our 10,000 NFTs, you will be able to watch it. If you don't have that NFT, you won't be able to watch it. Now, this allowed them to first off fund the creation of that series. And second, they had 10,000 loyal fans waiting to see their series and obviously couldn't stop talking about it. And being part of that 10,000 people, there's only 10,000 people will ever see it, also is something cool, something that people want to be part of. Everyone wants to be a part of a club they're not invited to. So these NFTs, that exclusivity around it, that artificial scarcity that you're creating, is something that drives up this value. And that's a big thing, big part of NFTs is artificial scarcity. Namely, if you create 10,000, that's it. You can always create more, but people can easily see like, hey, that's not part of the original collection. Because keep in mind, it's always logged on the public ledger, the blockchain. So you can always check who created it, when did they create it? Is this part of the original collection? And usually someone finds out, news spreads fast. So being part of these exclusive little clubs is something that everyone wants to be and everyone is fighting to get into. Another example is of Coca-Cola. So Coca-Cola went into the metaverse, Decentraland, which is essentially a virtual sort of world real estate platform. Doesn't look very fancy, but in there they sold NFTs. So they held an event, they sold a bunch of NFTs, and all the proceeds went to, I believe, the Special Olympics, so to a good cause. So you see there's lots of different use cases, and this is just use cases with images. It has nothing to do yet. We haven't even spoken about financial contracts or houses yet. This is still very much within the scope of images or art. And you can already see how creative you can be here. Other examples include, let's see if we have those in here. No, not yet. Other examples include, for instance, art that changes. So whenever you buy an NFT of, say, I don't know, a bottle, whenever that bottle gets resold, it changes slightly in appearance. So there's lots of different things you can do. And what essentially that is smart contracts communicating with each other to say what happens next. So it's a bit of a technical, I guess, endeavor as you create them, but it's all getting a lot easier. So a lot of times you hear, well, who cares? Why should we pay this much money? Who in his right mind would pay $1 million for an ape, a picture of an ape? And I think those are very fair questions. And I think this is also part of a broader discussion about Web 2, or the web that we know now, where we have centralized service providers like the Googles of this world, or Amazon or Zoom that we're on now, versus Web 3, which is all about the decentralized world, where not one owns it all. It's a bit like torrenting. So again, that's quite a broad discussion. So for today, I'll leave it to what are the pros in the context of art? Especially, why would an artist care about this? So, well, the first thing is that when you sell something online, those coins that you sell it for directly go into your wallet. There's no intermediary there. So that's way faster. The second thing is that also happens with royalties. So you don't have to go through an auction house, which sells it for you, takes a cut, then gives you 10% of whatever is left over. None of that is in this case necessary. You don't have to chase people, you don't have to do paperwork, it all gets done automatically. So for an artist, this is a dream come true. They'll get paid, they don't have to worry about it, they just need to check their wallet every now and then to see if some new coins came in, and they can exchange that for fiat, US dollars, Australian dollars, whatever you like. The second thing is it adds a creative dimension. So artists, like for instance, the example I just gave, can suddenly start to marry technology with their art. They can say, okay, if in their smart contract, they could, for instance, say at a certain time, at a certain date, this artwork changes. Nobody knows what it will change to, but you can create a bit of mystery around it. You could say it constantly changes in every resale. You can do all kinds of things with it, and we've really just scratched the surface there. So it creates an additional dimension that was previously not possible, but that we now do have access to. It also allows you to move objects around, and that's what I mean with portability of objects. So right now, if say you're within a game, any sort of game that you can think of, you buy a sword of sorts, you cannot take that sword and take it into a different game because they're two different games. Now, in the case of a lot of these blockchain-enabled games, is that asset you can take over through any of the other games, but also you can freely trade it on the blockchain. So you can sell it for fiat instead of selling it for, I don't know, another sword in your normal game. So it essentially removes your dependability on one particular platform. And that's a big thing in the gaming space. Now, having said that, gamers are not currently terribly excited about this because they feel, hey, you're just monetizing us further, which I think, they have a point to. But generally, I'd say you're no longer stuck within ecosystems like the Apple ecosystem, or when you sell something on Facebook Marketplace, it won't be automatically shown on also, say, Gumtree. Now, in the case of the blockchain, that works very different because the blockchain is a public ledger that can connect with anything. So it's a little bit difficult to wrap your head around, and I might not be explaining it very clearly, but it's something that we're seeing a lot of innovation in, and it's something that's going to probably become the norm over the next few years. The baked-in sales mechanism is something I briefly touched on with, for instance, the Kimmies and others as well. So, for instance, if you have those royalties, so say you put in your smart contract, whenever a resale occurs, I, as the creator, get 10% of the resale value. So say I sell my first NFT, I sell this bottle, this NFT of a bottle for $100. I sell it to Isabelle. Isabelle sells it to Ross. Ross pays $200 for it. Now I get 10% of that automatically. So I get $20 deposited directly into my digital wallet without me ever having to actually know that Isabelle sold it or that Ross bought it. I have nothing to do with any of that. That all happens automatically while I'm sleeping or I'm on the beach, or in my case, under the shades. So that's something where you can be very creative with, because we could say, okay, so I just earned $20. What if I give 50% of that $10 to anyone that's currently still holding it? That way, people that currently still hold that NFT earn money as well. Well, hey, then it becomes a bit of an asset that generates money for me. And then you start to talk about it because, hey, the more noise I make about these NFTs, the more people that will want to buy it, the higher the price goes up, the more that will be resold, the more I make as simply a passive NFT holder. Now, this sounds a bit like a Ponzi scheme, probably to many. And in a way, it works somewhat similar, except that it's all very transparent. There's no pyramid in sight. It's all flat, you can see it, but that's also the criticism on it. On the other hand, you can argue, well, what you really do is you turn your customers into evangelists. They may use this to speculate on the asset, or they may say, I just love the community more because of its exclusivity. So that's a debate that's still ongoing. I'm not sure if there is an answer to that. But what you traditionally see is that if an artist or a company, say, sells something online or raises it, let's take a step back. If, as a venture capital investor, so someone that invests in startups that then try and grow them, usually 60 cents of every dollar that a VC invests goes straight into the pockets of Google and Facebook. Why? Because they use that money to advertise their services. Whereas in this whole Web3 context, we say, well, look, our customers are not just our passive customers that buy our stuff. They are invested in our success, not just mentally, they want us to win. No, also financially, they have skin in the game. So the more they spread the word, the more we all earn. That's a little bit of the way that a lot of these projects work, is that they're all focused on building out that community, creating more noise. The more noise, the word spreads, the value goes up, we all win. So that's the idea of Web3. I think it's still in its infancy, because I think some of the points that are made about Ponzi schemes are very true. On the other hand, I think it's nice to see that customers become evangelists and that they have some skin in the game, and that when they buy into a project, they are part of that project. Last but not least is provenance and transparency. And that comes back to one of the first points I made. I watched a documentary the other day where someone bought a artwork at a small secondhand store somewhere in Germany, I believe it was. which he believes is actually a very unique artwork from one of the most famous German painters that's worth $160 million. Now, he bought it for very little money. For the past 3 years, he's been trying to prove that this is indeed a $160 million original artwork. And he's had to go through every specialist you could meet, travel through all the continents to try and get experts to say, yes, this is legitimate. Now, in the case of the blockchain, you don't have to do any of that. You can clearly see when a block was created and by who. So you never have an issue anymore in terms of provenance or transparency as to who used to own this. Was it literally sold 3 times and for how much? It's all in the public ledger. You can see who sold it, for how much money, in what period of time. It's all public, it's all transparent. So in a way, it's much more transparent, but also it's immutable. You cannot change it. Nobody can change those records. And that doesn't, essentially what that means is you cannot rewrite history. Once it's on there, it's on there. And in a way that allows you to keep records in a much safer manner than you could traditionally do. Another thing I wanted to really touch on was the generational trend. Namely that a lot of the people that were into blockchain and that are now into NFTs actually really enjoy it because it sort of empowers them. They've been disenfranchised with a lot of the way the world works now. They don't feel like they can, say, purchase a home. They don't want to climb the ladder. They want to find new ways to generate wealth and build their brand and have more equal opportunity. And a lot of people found that in the blockchain and NFT space, where people often don't know who's behind the project, where they often don't know who they're talking to, where they're based, what skin color they have. So a lot of people are really into getting that power back. And I think there's an undercurrent of movement there that sort of essentially brought all of this to the surface. And that's they're currently still the major buyers. It's not gone mainstream yet. But right now, the most active people are somewhat also people that have a thesis, that believe in a decentralization, that don't want to give out personal information anymore, that don't like the Facebooks of this world. So in many ways, it's more than just a product or more than just a technology. It's also being part of this new cultural movement. And I say young-ish people because you'd be surprised to know that the majority of NFT buyers are actual millennials, so they're not Gen Zs. And I think the simplest explanation is just because they simply have a bit more disposable income and are still quite native, digital native. This is something that I already touched on a little bit, but I just wanted to put it down as on the list as well. So why are NFTs valuable? Who would want to spend $1 billion on an ape? So here are some of the ways in which you can judge the value of a project, but in ways that other people judge it as well. And I think it's very subjective. A few things are not, such as financials and liquidity. So are there these sort of kickback incentives that can make a project more financially rewarding? But also, what about the community? A lot of people talk about community when they buy an NFT. They say, I don't care about the artwork. I don't care about the financial mechanisms. I care about the community, the access to the people I get. So if you look at the Bored Ape Yacht Club, some of the holders of the Bored Ape Yacht Club include Snoop Dogg, Eminem, you name it. So these are serious people. When the Bored Ape Yacht Club held a party in New York, Snoop Dogg showed up. So suddenly you, as a teenager that happened to buy a Bored Ape a year ago, is mingling with Snoop Dogg. So in many ways, these NFTs act as a access pass into a community, into an exclusive community. And this is the oldest concept in the world. Closed clubs, you name it. There's no difference here, except that it's all automated now where they can just verify whether or not you have that NFT. Provenance and scarcity I spoke about, then art and narrative. Again, this is very subjective. Some people simply like the art. A lot of people also go for the story. So every NFT collectible comes with the story. So if we look at the Kimmies, the story was Kim Jong-un decentralized himself to rule the metaverse. So that's the sort of the synopsis there. So he created 666 Kimmies and bestowed them each with a title to go out and rule the metaverse. The Bored Ape Yacht Club has one where they say, become part of the Bored Ape Yacht Club where we can all chill and hang. Now that was a big thing a year ago. Now you have projects that need to do their best a little bit more. But people subscribe to sort of the brand, the narrative behind it. And they're like, I like this. This sort of fits with who I am, the kind of people I like to hang with. I want to be part of this club. So I would try and look at these NFTs as not just an image, but as access to a club, and also as a speculative asset that people think, oh, if the right people come and join, if the right people tweet about it, this can just shoot up in value. And a lot of times it has, but the majority of NFT projects in the end don't work. So I'll just briefly discuss where to find NFT projects. So it's first off, only spend what you can lose. This comes back to the last point I made. It's a highly speculative asset. Buy it for fun, buy it to experiment, buy it to have a little bit of fun with. I don't think it's going away. Every big company is jumping into it. What we're currently seeing is just the first edition of what is possible. In 5 years' time, we'll laugh at this, but right now, this is what we have. So only spend what you can lose. Don't look at this as such as an investment. It's speculation, nothing more, nothing less. How do you find these projects? Well, you can read about them in the news, but usually that's too late. You really need to get into Discord and Twitter. If you don't know what Discord is, it's a horrible chat app, kind of like Slack, that we all use to chat about NFTs in. It's originally a gaming sort of Slack version chat app that is now used for NFTs as well. Unfortunately, I have yet to find a better alternative. You may get ADHD just by going into Discord. It's an absolute mess. You'll have to just have a look at it. Twitter is another good source of information. So follow Twitter, check out what's happening, see which ones are making noise, which ones you think are cool that you can relate to. And last but not least, look at the many marketplaces. OpenSea is an example, Foundation, Rarible. There's many out there that are selling NFTs that are a bit more art focused, or that have already been minted and that are now out, and you basically are buying one in the open market. So many different ways to look at, or many different ways to find them. I would just suggest don't buy anyone you just like. Get to know them a little bit first and see if you like it, and look at it as a speculation and a bit of fun. Now, this is an interesting bit, is how do you actually buy an NFT? It's extremely painful right now. It's an absolute horrible experience, yet there's billions of dollars being transacted. If you do not have a crypto wallet yet, you're gonna hate this process. Some NFT projects offer, for instance, PayPal or Stripe payments, which we did with the Kimmies as well, but many don't, and it's an absolute horrible experience to do. However, it's changing quickly. Shopify is jumping into the market. I think by the end of this year, you'll be able to buy NFTs by credit card, and you probably will not have to deal with the technology anymore. It'll just be in the background. But right now, you have to buy crypto. You may have to exchange that for some certain coin. You have to set up a digital wallet in which you hold your crypto and where you hold your NFT in, because it's a digital asset, and then you go and buy it. If you've never done this, you may need the help of a friend. Swing by at HQ, and I'm happy to sort of help you out as well if you get stuck. We've done that with a good number of people now, so getting you set up won't take too long. That's it. I told you I'd try and keep it short. I did it somewhat. Hopefully I didn't run through it all too fast. If you have any questions, I'll be here to answer them.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. That was a great overview of what NFTs are, and hopefully everyone came out of that just a little bit more knowledgeable about the whole process. So if you're thinking of starting your journey, I think you're sort of on your way today. We're going to go over to the Q&A section. I've already seen a few questions pop up in the chat and on the Discord. So before I ask if anyone here wants to turn on their mics and ask, I might just read out some of them if that's okay. So we've got one in the chat. So with the example of the brands, the creator has an established name brand. So for example, Ashton Kutcher, Coca-Cola, etc. Do you think that that contributes greatly to whether an NFT will be successful or not?
Yes, absolutely. No brainer. Basically what they do is they just monetize their followers. So you see that there was a lady called Irene who created Irene DAO. And she just said, hey, buy my NFT. Worst looking things you can possibly find. And I think she made a few million bucks in a few hours because people said, oh, I want to support you, I want to buy it. So if you have a large follower count, it's very likely that if you jump on this hype that you may succeed if you set it out right. Yes, I would say that's one of the biggest things to succeed is to have existing followers.
Yeah, and I think it goes down to your basic sort of marketing, marketing mix as well. Now, just on that one, we know that Irene has been selling, just pictures of herself very successfully from her fan base. We've got someone on the opposite end of the spectrum. So a question comes in and it's, what are your thoughts on the recent viral NFTs such as Ghazali Everyday? If you guys haven't heard of Ghazali Everyday, it's this Indonesian young man who has uploaded a picture of himself every single day for the past 3 years, turned them into NFTs, nothing special about them, but they were a viral hit and he's made millions and millions of dollars off it just because they're sort of funny pictures. What do you think of that?
I mean, that's where I think speculation comes into play, right? It's a bit of fun. People bought it. They said, why not? It seems to get more attention. Everyone is just hoping for the next bigger fool. Where they're like, if I buy it for $100, I'm sure someone will buy it for 200. And that's sort of what drives a lot of these projects. So I think, and I believe the founder of Coinbase said this once as well. He says, in the next 5 years, 95% of these projects will no longer exist. So, a lot of these projects are just a bit of fun. And don't, I guess, read into the hype too much. There's a lot of great use cases out there, a lot of them. And there's a lot of projects that will stay. But I would say that the majority, just like with startups, will eventually bite the dust. So when we look at this example of this young man in Indonesia selling a bunch of his NFTs, I think it's hilarious. I can't believe that it sold for millions, but at the same time, I'm also not surprised in the current climate.
Yeah, and I think as with anything that's speculative, you never know what's going to happen. I think the NFT world has seen changes week to week, really. And, by the end of this month, we'll probably have to do a new NFT Basics. Just the next question from Craig. Does anyone know the name of the software standard that is used to allow objects, for example, swords, to be transferred between games? I'm not sure if that's a bit too technical.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about that. It's usually on a particular network. So I would suggest you look at some of these blockchain games to see what they use. It's usually on Ethereum or they use ETH. But I'm not really into the gaming side of things, so I don't feel comfortable giving you a clear answer on that one. I see a few other questions here that I'll quickly try to run through. Let's see what we have. Cost of setting up an NFT from an artist point of view. So I'm assuming there's a few artists in the room that are looking to create their collection. It really depends. It's getting cheaper and cheaper. When we created the Kimmies, it was very difficult. We had to create our own custom smart contract, websites, artworks, figure out the rarity tables, all that sort of stuff, because there was just no resources on it. So we had to sort of start from zero. Nowadays, I think it is a lot easier. So really the key cost will be, do you have a tech person in your team if you want to do direct minting, saying directly selling it from your website? Are you an artist? Can you create it? Website costs, all the usual jazz, but there's not really a big tech cost like it would be with a startup, or there's not a big infrastructure cost like when you would set up a coffee shop. So it can be done fairly cheaply, but it depends on the qualities that you have. The real key thing will eventually be the marketing side of things, which is always the hardest bit. So you can do it quite cheaply, but it requires a serious time investment and you need a bit of skills to market it all. Marty's asking, what NFT business am I in? Check out thekimmies.com. So essentially, if you heard about English title certificates, where you become a lord or a duke, we said, who has the best titles of them all? Obviously, that was Kim Jong-un, who has the most ridiculous titles you can possibly think of, including the master of the computer who surprised the world. So we said, let's start selling North Korean title certificates. What's the worst they can do? Sue us, maybe kill us. Who knows? The borders are closed. So that's what we started doing with the Kimmies. And it's a bit of fun also because, we're just fascinated by North Korea. James is talking about Shopify supporting NFTs. They are already doing this in the US with a beta, which will mean that it's going to go mainstream very, very quickly. So Po Tien also asked about the cost of setting up an NFT. If you're not a digital artist, yes, you'll have to hire a digital artist, work with them. Gas fees depends on the network you're using, does not have to be much. We use Polygon, essentially no gas fees. Isabelle, maybe I'll leave it with you because I'm not sure if there are any else.
Yeah, all good. We've got one from Kashi. Thoughts on the increasing risk with wash trading and many using that as strategies to boost their NFTs?
Oh yeah, there's lots of sneaky ways that people are boosting these projects, and that comes back to, I think, having a good thesis. It's a bit of a fancy word for having a bit of a strategy, a bit of an idea of the projects you want to buy into. For instance, do you want to only buy those projects where you actually know someone in the team, right? One of the reasons why I openly talk about it, despite being at risk of getting assassinated by Kim Jong-un, is because at least it grants a little bit of legitimacy to it. At least, I won't do a rug pull in the sense that, hey, we'll just abandon the project the day after launching it. So I think having a bit of criteria for yourself where you say, hey, maybe it's knowing who's involved, could be an easy one. It might be around community stats. It might be around projects they've done previously, connections they have. There's a lot of different ways in which you can sort of try and judge a project. But it will never be exact science, and you will always run that risk. But also you can check a little bit about how they've run their NFTs in the past, because again, all transactions are in a public ledger.
Sorry about that. On that note, do you have any tips on how to differentiate between short-term and long-term NFT projects?
Differentiate between short-term and long-term, I think it's very hard to say. Some people say it's the strength of the community, which can be one, although you've seen there as well where there's a lot of hype and it dies out. I think it's about looking at them over a longer period of time to see if they do anything. This might be looking at past projects, but right now I find it such a difficult question to answer because nobody really has an answer to it yet. Anyone can stop at any one time. So if you're looking at this purely from an investment point of view, there are programs out there, I believe, what is it, Sunson is one, where you can actually look at the hard data to see how many buyers do they have? Is it all concentrated in, say, 10 buyers, or do they have a few hundred buyers? Just that way you know that they can't suddenly dump it all. Is there a lot of community activity? Is it constantly trading? What's the trade volume? So you could take a bit of a quantitative approach, but in the end, it's very hard to say which projects will make it, and that's no different from normal startups.
Great. Quite a few questions, so hopefully we'll get through all of them. James asks, do you know of anyone DeFi approach peer-to-peer lending for the purchasing of an NFT? For example, essentially a DeFi BNPL for NFT.
Not from the top of my head, although I do know there's a few in that space that are currently being built. And I think generally what you're seeing now in the NFT space is that a lot of interesting solutions are being built right now that will be coming out in the next few months. So, but I can't point to anyone specifically now.
Cool. Just a couple more. Felicia says, just wanting to know if the NFT concept can be applicable to buying a real world object, for example, a house. It is such a complex, timely, and expensive process. How do you think the possibility of this happening in the near future, and what's holding it back? Thank you.
So this has happened. The problem is that it's a real world asset, and with the real world asset comes real rules as well. So a lot of times, it just complicates matters. So there were examples of houses being sold, but you still have to abide to all local regulations. And they then start to, the local regulations or buyers and such are looking at like, okay, well, how the hell does this work then with this whole NFT thing? Doesn't that increase my risk? What if I lose it? What if someone steals it? Do they then have ownership of my house? So that's an area in which I'm not always sure if NFTs are very beneficial. One thing that I thought was kind of funny was, I believe it was in Scotland, that someone sold a whiskey barrel. So you could buy the NFT, and the NFT essentially is your ticket or your sort of deed for which you can then get that barrel in 10 years' time. So I thought that was an interesting use case, because you can easily trade that barrel. Say in 5 years' time, you're like, shit, I need a bit of money. well, by that time, you know, it's already matured for 5 years. People may only want to wait another 5 to 10 years or so, depending on how aged you like your whiskey. And say, yeah, I'll sell it at a profit because look, it's worth more now. So there are some examples of real life assets that are being traded, used as NFTs.
Great. Do you need to have a relatively big digital collection as opposed to just a few individual artworks to successfully sell NFTs?
No, you can sell whatever. You see Beeple sells them like one at a time. There's plenty of artists that just sell one or two. And you know, everyone is just sort of figuring it out. There's no standard yet. I think you've seen both. And in many ways, it's much harder to sell a larger collection than a smaller collection. I see one here about why are there not many NFT projects built on Solana versus Ethereum or Bitcoin? There are. Solana is another network. So this is where we get a little bit technical. And I think those that are just sort of in the basics may start to zone out a little bit. But there's plenty of different networks out there, and Solana is one of them. Now, what happened in the past year was that Solana had a ton of funding, really increased in value. And a lot of the people that made money off that increase in value and said, okay, I'm going to cash some out, and then I'm going to reinvest it into NFTs to keep it within that Solana network so the value keeps rising. And that's how it sort of kicked off this large NFT boom there as well. The problem is that Solana is not supported on many of the marketplaces like OpenSea, secondary sales marketplaces. They have their own. So it has a less broad appeal. There's simply less buyers out there, but they're more committed buyers. So I still think it's a suitable chain for NFT projects.
Cool. I've got a question that came in privately. What are the most innovative practical NFT solutions that you've come across in recent times, to Duco and Isabelle?
So many. I think where do I say? I think those that are changing are very interesting. So you don't really know what your artwork looks like until later. Again, this is just focused within art. It goes well beyond art. NFTs has nothing to do with artworks. It's just a unique smart contract, just to keep that in mind. I think we're just starting to see now as well as these digital assets that you can start trading, or for instance, you can start buying clothes for your artworks. So for instance, you can buy a hat for your Bored Ape. You can buy an Adidas hat that then you can put on. There's just 100 different things that are happening at the moment. But really what they're doing is they're tying smart contracts in with each other. It's a pretty technical sort of thing. I did also like what the Australia Open did. I think that what they did was very unique. So if you type in Australia Open NFTs, you'll learn a little bit about how they've done it. And it's all about community engagement. And I think they did that extremely well.
Yeah, no, and just on that, I think it's really about marrying the art and the technology, as Duco very aptly put. It's, you know, the possibilities are endless. And I was going to mention the Australian Open one as well, because when I read about that, I thought, you know, that is very, very creative. So not to take up more time, so I'll let you guys Google it yourself. What is the difference between sports IP and properties? For example, NBA creating their own NFT marketplace versus selling on an NFT platform. Is it a matter of profit margins / winner takes it all / IP rights ownership? I think it doesn't have to be sports, it could be any sort of industry. But yeah, what's the difference between, what are the benefits with selling on an NFT platform and creating your own marketplace?
Yeah, so maybe first on the IP rights issue. So a lot of people mistakenly think that if you buy an NFT, you own the IP rights. That's not true. It's similar to if you buy an Adidas sweater, that doesn't mean you can put your Adidas logo everywhere. So you literally just buy a node in the network. You still have to read the terms and conditions. And generally, you do not own the IP unless it's clearly stated on their website. Then having your own marketplace versus selling on NFT platforms. Well, if you have confidence in your own marketing abilities, if you have a large following, why not sell it directly? You don't need a platform in between to take a 2.5% transaction fee like OpenSea. So, but if you don't have that, or if you don't know how to build that, which is more often the case, it can be a lot easier to simply put it up on existing platforms where you can upload it. So this is where it gets technical, is you can create an NFT. Isabelle and I created one last week for fun, I think in less than 20 minutes, right? So put it together, uploaded it, created a whole thing on OpenSea. It's up in 20 minutes. No difference from uploading a JPEG and giving it a bit of a description. there's no art to it. The art is the marketing of it, the story, the mechanics, the smart contract functionality. That's where it gets complicated. So if you want to do it yourself, you can, but it becomes a lot more technical. And that's something that I had to learn with the Kimmies. Was I thought, oh, this will be easy, bit of fun, learn it. Did not turn out to be easy at all. It was an absolute, it just broke my head. So now maybe that's because I wasn't terribly good at it to begin with, but it was quite a technically complex project. And that was also fun, part of the fun, but it can be quite difficult. So I'd say, look, if you have the team, if you have the brand, you can do anything you want. If you don't, it becomes a lot harder.
Cool. And then I'm going to keep this as the last question. So if you have any more questions, you can send it to us and we'll try and get through them some other time. But Raveen asks, what are the key metrics, if any, that are usually used to get a sense of the value of an NFT?
It depends. A lot of them, you have no idea before they launch, right? A lot of projects try to build up hype, and then when they launch, that's when you sort of know how they do. So what they say, well, before launch, you can look at, well, how active is the community? How big is the community? How active is that community? How big is the collection? Does that sort of stack up to each other a little bit? Who's the team behind it? What are the mechanics? Have they been doxed? Meaning that, is the team actually out there? Can you talk to them? How do they engage you? So there's all those sort of usual metrics, but really before a project has launched, you can't really judge much except for the artworks they put out and the community they have right there. That's it, right? There's very little, and maybe if they put the contract out. Then once it has launched, it depends. What's their activity like? What is their roadmap like? Do they look a bit professional? There's 100 different things you can look at. And I might put out depending on if people want it here, I might put out a little list that you can use, a little checklist to use how to value a project. And we'll also be creating one on how to create an NFT project. Because since I've created the Kimmies, I've been working with a number of artists on their collections, one launching in Barangaroo very soon. So I'm happy if there's enough interest to put something out there as well. Because I feel that, it's pretty complex, but once you've done it once, it's pretty easy. So if you're interested in a investment hypothesis, just type in the chat investment. If you're more interested in creators sort of perspective, a creators list, type in creators or do both. So investment or creators, that way we'll have a bit of an idea of what you guys are looking for, and then we can sort of tailor our next events to it.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess we'll just quickly wrap up. If you go to the next slide, you could please.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so on that note, if you're looking for any sort of feedback or advice, if you, for example, already have an NFT collection that you're creating, or if you're looking to invest in more, we do have office hours that are free to attend every single Friday. If you go onto Eventbrite or Meetup, or if you just look on our Discord or socials, you should be able to find the link. So that's every Friday, 10 to 12. Feel free to come by and then chat about NFTs and your projects that you're working on. And then on a similar note, next slide, please. Yeah, in 2 weeks, this time exactly 5 to 6 on a Tuesday, we'll have the next step in our NFT journey. So we'll be talking all about DAOs. So if you've ever heard of the term DAO before, it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. We'll have a guest speaker, Alice Su, who is the creator of quite a few DAOs herself. She'll be doing all the basics. So it'll be like this NFT Basics, except all about decentralized autonomous organizations. And again, you'll find all the information on our socials, or if you look us up on Eventbrite, and hopefully we'll see you there. You guys have been great, and please join the Discord. I'll be sharing the recording as well as resources and the slides. And if you have any questions, please hit us up. More than happy to help out. So hopefully you took away something today, and hopefully you guys start on your NFT journey. Yes, hopefully we'll see a few creators between you. Don't forget to let me know if you have a great collection so I can buy one of your NFTs. Exactly. And I'll see you guys in the NFTs Oz Discord. Feel free to connect me with me on LinkedIn or shoot me an email, whatever is helpful or easy for you. And we'll see you at the next event.